Welcome back to the Intelligent Builder podcast, sponsored by Plutus Agents. We help residential contractors and home builders eliminate the manual chaos in scheduling, client communication, and estimating so they can stop wasting time on admin, increase their margins, and keep building with the same team. If that sounds useful, connect with me on LinkedIn and DM me the word growth for a free growth consultation. So today, I'm joined by Jensen Roll, the president and owner of Roll Construction, an award-winning custom home builder and remodeler in North Carolina. They're known for clear communication, tight timelines, and a clean process. So we'll dig into the systems behind their growth, the culture that keeps the quality high, and where he sees the Carolinas housing market heading next. So Jensen, it's great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Of course, yeah. So before we really kind of dive into it, could you just give me a snapshot of what Roll Construction does today? Kind of like the typical project profile?
Yeah, so we started in 2018. We're in central North Carolina, Burlington, North Carolina, if you've heard of it. And we focus predominantly on new construction homes. We do some spec, semi-custom, and full custom homes. Right now, we do anywhere from 10 to 15 houses a year. Still kind of growing up into that space. Like I said, started in 2018. In our first year, I don't think we built any homes, and we've just kind of grown from there.
Awesome. So is there anywhere you kind of draw the line on the ideal fit for a build? Like, so your pipeline stays clean?
Yeah, so we do some remodels and additions as well. At this point, for the company that we've built and the types of projects we focus on, for the most part, if it's under $75,000, it doesn't usually work for our pipeline. And then if it's really, really high end custom, over 2 million and up, that's not often going to be the type of build that we are seeking out. And it's not something that we've done a lot of in the past. And then we do have a commercial license. We do some smaller build outs. So like a spa or like a mom and pop's restaurant, storefronts, things of that nature. But we're not doing a lot of ground up new construction commercial projects either.
Okay, cool. So then how about you? So what do you do during the day? What's your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time behind this computer here, diving into the numbers, overseeing projects, talking with our crews, talking with our site supers, project managers, so on and so forth, making sure everything's still kind of running how it needs to be. And then really kind of casting vision for the future, thinking about what does our brand look like? Who's our customer, ideal client? How are we going to continue this growth trajectory that we have right now? And, how do we continue to build the team, make sure we've got the right folks in the right seats, so on and so forth.
Awesome. Yeah. So do you do like 5 or 10-year kind of visions? I was talking to somebody yesterday. They were saying that they do that in their business. So is that something you kind of focus on, the vision?
Yeah. So we do 3-year, 5-year, and 10-year vision. And we're part of a coaching organization called Highspire, which is a group of builders that meets from around the country and Canada. And so, we share that vision with other builders in the nation and within Canada, and just go through and think about how do we achieve those goals, those visions, what are the next steps, so on and so forth.
So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so could you kind of walk me through like the first maybe 48 hours after new inquiry? Once you get some intake, who touches that? What info do you collect? And how quickly do you move from the scope and building timelines?
Yeah. So I don't receive our initial calls. We have an executive assistant. Her name's Katie, and she's a rock star. And so all of our phone calls usually are coming to her. And then if it's an online inquiry, those are usually going to her as well. She is making sure that those are kind of a right customer fit for us. If it's a great customer, then that phone call comes to me, and we'll schedule a 20-minute time to just kind of talk through the project. And then if it is a project that's really going to work out and we're excited about it and the client's excited to work with us, then we'll put together a site visit. From the site visit, then we work towards getting into a pre-construction and design phase. That's the general kind of like initial steps leading into acquiring a client for us.
Okay, cool. So you're kind of still involved in that process. Once they get qualified, they get sent to you, and then you kind of chat them up and see where it goes from there?
Yeah, so right now we don't have anybody in a sales role. So we're still at a size company wise where I really like being in that sales process. It's one of the hats I still enjoy wearing a lot. And it's also a place where, you get a couple tough clients back to back. It's a real downer for the whole team, and it really starts to impact the culture. So we like to hand select, who we're working with.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So then kind of going with those tough clients, then I kind of want to zoom out and see what you've learned over these last few years, because you started in 2018, right? That's what
Yep.
you said?
Yep.
Okay, so then what are kind of like some of the early pain points you experienced that you know to never repeat again, like change order nightmares, sub coordination, anything like that?
I mean, I will say you're not going to work in this industry without dealing with some difficult situations, difficult clients. I think that anytime where, for whatever reason, we drop a ball, a customer doesn't fully understand something, and we move towards, a finished product that isn't fully understood, that becomes really tough for everybody. So, one of our biggest faux pas or issues that we ran into, we were building a garage for a client that, we had a really good set of plans. We budgeted the job well. Everything looked good. We pour the footing, the foundation, the slab, everything's going really well. And this is a nice garage. It's Tesla shingles. It's got the, battery system for charging the car, all that kind of stuff. And, the plans have the ceiling height at 12 foot. It has a bonus room above it with a hoist to be able to bring things from the garage floor into the loft. And we frame it up. We put the roof on, everything's looking great. The customer walks out, goes like this, looks back at me and goes, "It's too tall." And so, there's this kind of experience that we've gained over time where now every time I meet with a client, I say, let's talk about the difference between 8 foot, 10 foot, and 12 foot. When we walk into this room, right now I'm standing in an 8 foot tall ceiling room. Let's talk about a 10 foot tall ceiling, and let's talk about a 12 foot tall ceiling, because I've had clients that walk into that 8 foot tall ceiling and they go, "This is not for me. That's not what I want." And then I, once upon a time, had a garage that we built for a client and they did not want the 12 foot. So we went through and we chopped 2 foot off. And that was a serious change order, but the client, that's what they wanted. They didn't like that, that hoist was going to be having to raise up that far, and they didn't see a need for that extra space. And so they were willing to pay to go ahead and change that. But two learning experiences there. One is communication and two is more communication.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a tough client moment right there too.
Yeah.
So what have you standardized process wise since then to kind of maintain that transparency and keep clients happy throughout the process?
Yeah, so a lot of different things. The team has grown. I mentioned Katie before. She's helped us implement a lot of different systems and processes that we've put in place. And, we have our pre-construction side of things. If you go to our website, you'll see a construction roadmap. And my favorite thing to do is walk through that construction roadmap with a client and say, all right, if this is where it starts and it goes all the way around right here, that is the first shovel in the ground. That's the first, boots on site. All this stuff up here that we're going through, those are our 22, 26 steps of pre-construction. And so from initial phone call all the way down through, site visit and design consultation and specifications, all that kind of stuff, we get down to the very bottom and now we're permitting and ready to build. And so the thing that I really like to point out is the success of the project really happens in pre-construction. But a lot of folks, customers and builders, are just excited to, get framing, get building, finishing it out. And you can kind of put your cart in front of the horse if you don't focus on the pre-construction.
Yeah, that's a really good thing to have the client kind of visualize that too. That's something I actually talk about a lot on the podcast too, is visibility. It comes up a lot. So I read this article recently actually, and I posted it on LinkedIn too, but it surveyed construction pros and it found that investments in tech have been up over 70%. But then the workers, 1 out of 2, so over 50%, find it to be less productive. Their productivity decreased.
Mm.
So I kind of want to know what kind of processes or tech you've gotten rid of recently because it just created noise, and then vice versa. What did you replace it with to kind of
Yeah.
increase
Yeah.
productivity?
Sure. Well, so we're in this industry, we're considered a younger company run by a younger, owner. And so I'm still in my 30s, and, most of my peers that own and run their own construction companies start around 45 and go up from there. And so we really embrace technology. We love working with technology. We see it as, another tool in the toolbox. But there's a point where your toolbox gets really heavy. You don't need all those tools. And so we try to be really careful not to have too many different technologies. We lean really heavily on JobTread, and that is our, project management platform. We're able to do our onboarding process with the client. So from the initial phone call, they're going into JobTread, and then from there, we build everything out. We do scheduling, scope of work, contracts, budgets. We even track, through a bolt on another software, we're able to make sure we're keeping COIs, B&Is, subcontractor agreements, so on and so forth. So a lot of our software is all connected, and we try to not burden our team that's in the field with more than a couple logins, because oftentimes, I am lucky if I can get them to log their hour to the right job with the right activity at the time that they actually did the work in JobTread. If I ask them to then go into Slack and then go into some other software to put in a receipt or whatever it is, if I'm sending them to 5 different softwares in the day, then I think you're right. You get that 50% that's just like sick of it. And not to mention, like, there's folks that go into our trades so that they never have to touch their phone during the day. We're a little bit, pushing against that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cool tools out there, but it's definitely pretty common that they don't get used as much as they should. So, do you have some sort of kind of client-facing portal? Is that what you were kind of getting at there? So they can
Yeah.
see the whole process?
Yeah. So JobTread is neat because, we have our back end, and that's where you see it all, where the sausage is made, all that kind of thing. And then there's the front end where we get to turn on and turn off what the customer sees. So in the event that we have a cost plus contract and, we want the client to be involved with the schedule, we want them to see our daily job logs, we want them to see, everything. They can see all of that, but they're probably not going to see, me reaching out to our subcontractors to make sure their insurance is current. They're not going to see us making sure all the subcontractor agreements are signed, stuff like that, would still not be there. Most of the work we do is fixed price. So they're going to see their contract that they signed. They're going to see the total budget. They're going to see their allowances for the project. And then they'll see daily updates. So pictures of the site coming together. They'll see kind of a abbreviated version of our schedule. We might have, a full, complicated, beautiful schedule with moving parts and, a critical path and all that. They're just going to see, uh, you know, site prep, footing, foundation, framing, things like that.
Awesome. So they got the simple visibility. That's super important. And you talked about fixed pricing. So how does that work? Does that help you with the estimating process and make it go by a lot faster?
Well, so fixed price versus cost plus is a really big kind of topic within construction. We like the fixed price because it gives our clients that feeling that they know what we're going to build it for. And we're not, like I said, doing really, really high end custom homes. We do custom homes. We love doing custom homes. But when we're doing a custom home, usually there's a really good plan that we're working off of. And any of the different pieces that we want to have some flexibility on, we're going to attribute an allowance toward that. So we can go ahead and get that contract signed, get the project started while we work out some of the more like minute details. So an example would be countertops. We're not going to require our client to pick out a countertop 6, 12 months before we start building. We might go and, look at countertops closer to actually installing those countertops. And they're going to have a budget of, $70 per square foot to go towards countertops. And, that way they're able to do that. Folks that are saying 6, 12 months ahead, this is the countertop, you got prices that potentially could go up. Then you also have the really terrible thing that happens where that countertop is no longer available. The client has fallen in love with it. They can't have any other option. And now you, as the builder, are stuck in this difficult situation where you have to tell the client, hey, it's no longer available. We need to look at some other options.
Okay, that makes sense. Say the price goes up or it's no longer available. Do you have vendor relationships too that you try to manage?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So we've got a lot of great relationships that we've built with our vendors over the years, and we have multiple vendors in multiple industries. And so, depending on how locally we're building or if we're building a little bit out of town, we've got different options. Some of our suppliers are regional, some of them are local, some of them are national. And so depending on, what that specific material is, depends on who we're working with.
Okay, cool. I want to look back into kind of like the project roadmap. So end to end, from intake to closeout, where does your software really earn its keep? And then at the same time, kind of where does, a checklist beat those apps or tools?
Yeah. So I will say we have not yet found a software that gets rid of the whiteboard, gets rid of the checklist and the paper, but we lean on the software because the software doesn't get lost. The coffee doesn't get spilled on it, doesn't get erased, whatever that is. And so if you look at the entire kind of construction process, you've got or let's say client initial, call and onboarding. Then you've got pre-construction, then you've got production, then you've got closeout, and then you've got warranty. And so our process from start to finish could be anywhere from a 6 to 8 month to a 2 year. I mean, 6 to 8 month would just get you through closeout. Then you've got that extra year on the back end to warranty. So our software takes us from the very start to the very finish of that. And we use different softwares along the way. But JobTread is really helping us from the initial phone call, taking notes of, okay, we're talking with this client. They want a house that's this many square feet. They want to have this many rooms. It's going to be on well and septic, or it's going to be on city sewer and city water. They've already found the lot. They haven't found the lot. We've got, a whole survey that we'll kind of go through in the initial 20-minute call where we'll tick all those boxes. So that way, when we go and do that site visit, they don't feel like we're talking to them for the first time all over again. There's nothing more frustrating than, as a customer, when you've already explained for 20 minutes what you want to do, and then the contractor shows up, maybe it's a week later, they're on site and they go, so what do you want to do? And they're like, I already told you. So we try to make sure that we are listening, that we're documenting, and that we're using that information throughout the process. And that documentation has saved us a lot of money down the road, because if we are at the very beginning of a project, we've documented everything, we get halfway through the project and the customer doesn't remember something the same way we remember it, we can go back to documentation and say, oh, you're right, we were wrong. Or actually, this is what we documented on this day at this time. And, can we talk about that a little more?
Okay, so all that documentation kind of stays in the system.
Yeah. Yeah. So that gets documented in a few different ways. Pre-construction, that looks like, our scope of work, looks like, notes from the calls, looks like all of our bids from subcontractors bidding the scope of work. That gets documented on the front end. And then once the production starts, then we start getting daily job logs from our, site super or our field operations manager showing us, okay, on this day it rained, we didn't do any work. This is the first day we started digging footings. We poured the same day. We got it inspected, all these different things. We take pictures. We talk about it. If a problem's coming up, we talk about that problem. So that way, 6 months into the project, we've forgotten. We have 3 other jobs going. We don't know. We can go back and look at the daily job logs and say, oh yeah, we did have a week off because there was this holiday, and then it rained for 3 days straight. And then, the subcontractor was sick or whatever. We can document that and remember, so that way if we're getting asked, hey, why did this take longer than you said it was going to take, we have an answer. Or if it's something that's a little bit more problematic, we can pull that back up and say, we understand your frustration, understand that this is really important to you, this is how we know this is what happened. The other thing that we love documenting, we call it having x-ray vision when we look back on a project, is, if our client is getting ready to hang that TV where they give you those 3-inch lag screws to screw in, that plate. They call us and they go, "Hey, we're getting ready to put this in. Are we going to hit anything in the wall?" We pull back up, all the pictures from that project. And after rough-ins, before insulation, we go and take a video of every single room and every different place in the house to see where all the wiring is, to see where all the data cable is, to see where all the plumbing is, just so that way, when we are starting to go back and do some of that kind of stuff, we know where it is. And if we get called to go back and do more work at that house later on, that's really nice. And it gives us a little bit more advantage over the next person because we have that information. Now, if they reach out to us and say, "Hey, we're getting ready to hire somebody else to do the work, can we have those pictures?" That data is theirs throughout the entire process too, and those pictures are available to our clients. So we've done that's saved us a lot of money when we've gotten that phone call of, "Hey, I've got a leak in my roof," and we go back and look at everything and say, "Well, have you checked to see if that's a furnace leaking? Can you check the pan, or maybe it's the hot water heater," something along those lines. Even if it's a year or two down the road, we still have that information.
Yeah, that's really smart. So it seems like you've got some great systems in place to kind of be able to maintain your growth. So speaking of kind of the growth, like this past year, we'll say, where does that mostly come from? Is that like referrals, repeat clients, designers, architect partners? What other kind of inbound?
Well, it's really a good mix of all of those. I think building strong relationships with other folks working in the trades like architects, draftsmen and women, and realtors, so on and so forth. That's a great place that we spend time kind of networking and building relationships. We also have started building spec homes, and so as we're building spec homes, that's another great place to get a referral for another house. So we're building a pre-sale right now where a client drove by a spec house that we were building. They loved the design. They liked the way that we were, handling the job site and overseeing the job site. And they called us and said, "Hey, I love that house. That's not where I'd like my house to be, but I have this other place. Can you build it here?" And so, we do that. And then, lettering on the trucks, that gets us a little bit. I would say maybe like 10-15% is from signage and lettering on the trucks and just overall brand. And then being involved in the community, community engagement and involvement is, a big value of ours. And so we are involved with the Chamber of Commerce. We're involved with our local builders association. We have different nonprofits that we support and work with. And I think that, we're a local, smaller builder, and our clients like seeing that we're a small company that is involved and cares about our community.
Yeah, that's awesome. Maintaining that brand recognition and relationships with everyone around you. That's good. So how about your goals kind of in the future? So the next 12 months, what would make you consider that a good year or maybe versus a great year? What are some operational metrics you're looking for?
Yeah. So there's a few. I think without diving into all the numbers and kind of that stuff, I think
Yeah.
it is driving down overhead. So making sure that as we scale, we're not growing the overhead at the same rate, which will increase our profitability. I think most business owners would tell you that's a goal. Beyond that, I think it's trying to grow our spec projects alongside of our custom and remodel projects. So continuing to really build out in both those places. We've built a really great team. We've got a lot of folks right now that are doing really good work for us, both in-house and subcontractor side. And so now it's really just filling the pipeline and keeping everybody busy, making sure that we've got enough work for everyone to, obtain what it is that they're trying to get. We do performance-based bonuses. And so we think that, if you're going to work really hard here, we want you to get something from that. And so we've got to make sure we're giving enough opportunities through having enough jobs for that to be an exciting perspective for somebody. So I think that as this coming year, or as this year comes to a close and we look kind of towards 2026, we would love to be able to start 20 different home projects. So coming out of the ground this year, we will start close to 15. And so if we were able to increase by 5 and then also jump back into, we haven't been doing a whole lot of remodels. If we could pick up a little bit more remodel work, so additions and remodels, we'd like to be doing some more of that again. It's great for cash flow, and we've learned the hard way diving into doing some spec homes that you gotta wait a little longer to recoup your investments on those.
Yeah, okay, that's awesome. You got some great goals. So hypothetically, let's say you have a magic wand and you can fix one thing in the business that's maybe holding you back, fix one bottleneck, something that's slowing you down to reach that goal. What would that one thing be?
Yeah, I think so. Right now, one of the real big things that we're focused on is we, when we started this business, I came into the industry with a business background. I didn't grow up building. And so coming into the industry, one of the issues that I saw was, communication from the contractor to the customer is not great. And when we first get a client and we're talking with them about, what we value and what we're going to work on and doing this project together, usually maybe like every other customer has this horror story of working with someone in the trades or working with a contractor in the past. And a lot of those break down to a place where communication just slipped through the cracks or maybe wasn't valued in the same way. And so we focused really well on outward communication. And I think we do a good job with that. But we want to focus a little bit more on internal communication, transparency, and building, our team stronger and stronger. And so we've recently really invested in implementing EOS, which is the entrepreneurial operating system. I think probably you're familiar with it and a lot of others are. And so I think Gino Wickman wrote a book called Traction that really dives into the nitty gritty of that. And so we've just started implementing that. So that way we've got a lot more communication happening around goals, issues that come up, things that we need to be doing. And so that way it's not just, one or two people that are running the company, taking care of all this stuff and making decisions in a silo. It is a full team of leadership that's making decisions together. And I think that it will really help improve our internal company culture, grow us into the company we want to be, a year from now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. EOS, I would like to know how you're getting into that. But for the podcast, I'll just ask you one more question. So I'd really like to know where you see the home building industry going in the next 12 to 18 months. Kind of, we'll stay in your area, but then at
Yeah.
the same time, I kind of want to know what are some of the things that you plan to double down on at Roll Construction to kind of stay ahead.
Yeah. So in North Carolina and specifically in our area, we're seeing a lot of growth. We're seeing a lot of jobs coming to North Carolina. We have, at least in our area, we sit directly in between Greensboro, which is the triad, and then the Raleigh Durham triangle area. And so we're seeing all this overflow come into our area, and we still have a lot of land relative to whatever market you're in. But in my perspective, we have a lot of opportunities to develop and build. And so as that's happening, we are definitely trying to make sure that we're attracting a portion of that market to build and develop. And so I think as that moves forward, we want to be careful that we're not too overzealous and get ahead of our skis, but at the same time, really being aggressive to take on opportunities to develop, whether it's a few houses at a time or working with some other builders to do a neighborhood or something along those lines. But then also making sure that as all these folks are moving into this area and there's not enough housing stock, that we're able to help with that. And so my general perspective is that this is a strong market, that we have a lot of things kind of moving in the right direction here. I think that there's definitely headwinds. I'm not saying that I think, we are separate from anything else that might happen nationally. And I know that we have some things going on in the market that I can't begin to understand, but I can see that it's definitely causing some consumer confidence issues, which make it tough. But the thing that was nice to wake up to, I don't know if it was probably 2 weeks ago, was seeing the article where Warren Buffett had just plowed, I think, almost $1 billion into the single family home market. And so little things like that help me know that we're on the right track. But I came into this industry well after, 2007, 2008, and probably not a week goes by where somebody doesn't mention or bring up the fact that, don't count your chickens. There's always the opportunity that the market changes. And so we try to keep that in mind and some level of confidence and optimism, but we don't want to live in optimism. We want to, take some conservative steps towards growth without, taking too much risk.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you, Jensen. That was great. Let's end it there. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and share with a builder or founder in your circle. But Jensen, where should people connect with you? Website, LinkedIn?
Yeah. You can check out our website. We spend a lot of time on Instagram and Facebook. So if you look at Roll Construction on Instagram or facebook.com/Roll Construction, that's a really strong guess. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. And then I'm on LinkedIn. I don't spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. Our company's on LinkedIn. You can check us out there. But if you put Roll Construction in Google, hopefully you find us, but Instagram would be the best place to look. So appreciate your time, Owen, and excited to learn more about the company you're building.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't worry about it. I'll link everything below so they can just go check it out themselves. But to the audience, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Intelligent Builder.